welcome to what I read in July and August. One of the main things I read in the last couple of months are 10 books from the Booker longlist. Those reviews are all up on my channel, but in between all of that mid that was making me want to kill myself, I read a couple of other books here, and I felt like talking about them now because these videos do well in terms of view count, and I felt like selling out. The first book that I read 2 months ago now was the book Dear Life by Alice Munro. This was my first experience with a full collection of Munro stories. I have read intermittent stories from her from time to time online, and I've always been kind of like, yeah, it's alright, I guess. I've been none the wiser about why she won the Nobel. After reading a full collection of short stories, I do get it, but my opinions of her haven't changed very much personally. There was one short story in this collection called Train that I think was the best short story I've ever read. Absolutely fantastic, very delicate. The main character comes across as really layered, and the short story has this really effective time jump halfway through that's quite unexpected, but has a lot of weight to it. It's beautifully written and feels quite floaty and elegant. It feels like a reinvention of some old parable. It's clear that this is the kind of short story that the Nobel Committee awarded when she got it. Not all the short stories in this are like that, though. The first story in this book was literally like something Sally Rooney would write as a short story, and I wish I were kidding. It was so not unique, and the subject matter was like, who gives a fuck? Story number 6, I think it was called Pride, was super unfocused, and the second half was totally different to the first half. Although some of her stories do feel like they're getting across something an author would take a whole book to say. The short story Gravel is an example of that. I feel like in some of her writing, the message or the point of the short story is lost or kind of unseen in the inanity of the story itself. And often I am combing through a short story from her to find clues to illustrate what the story is about, and I nearly always come away feeling unrewarded for that. Story number 7, Corrie, is an example of that. The stories are slices of life where the author has often deliberately stepped away until they make some interesting sort of time jump or something like that. But that means that reading a lot of the short stories back to back can feel really tedious. Not all of them feel super rewarding, and even the ones that do aren't necessarily revelatory. Read that short story Train, though, if you can find it. That boosted the entire collection up a star for me. I was fucking incredibly moved when I read that story. I thought it was incredible. So yeah, I would recommend that at least. The next book I read was a weird one. It was by an author called Raúl Zurita, and it was called Purgatory. Purgatory is a book of poems, I guess. There's a lot of discussion of this book's relevance towards the oppressive Pinochet regime, which is very rarely mentioned head-on in this. There's pictures in this, there's newspaper clippings, there are poems that are written out of order, and some of the numbering in the ordering isn't even there, and there's no consistent narrator voice. The book is trying to get you into a mind space similar to the author under this regime, without giving you that kind of socio-political grounding that another book would give you. This book read so much more to me as an interesting look into the mind of someone who is panicked and depressed, and also maybe somebody who has a mental illness. The cover of the book is a picture of the author with self-harm scars on his face. It's a choice. But I found within all of this book this really interesting, sad feeling that was throughout the whole book, regardless of the wild swings it took. I would like to see him write a book of poetry that isn't just fuckery, but as it is, this is really jolting and unique. This author has been touted for the Nobel Prize occasionally, and now that I've read his book, I can safely say that no, that will not happen. The next book I read... just dislike the video, I don't care. The next book I read is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, and I thought it was very boring. This is a book about two girls, whatever. I found both of our lead characters in this book, these two young girls, very uninteresting, especially Leela or whatever her name is. All of the minor characters in this book blended together, and I was constantly flicking back to the front to be able to tell them apart because of the way that the book is written. I don't know if Elena is the progenitor for some of the stereotypes that are in this book, but I was rolling my eyes constantly at some of the descriptions or some of the places the plot went, where I went, okay, I knew that was gonna happen, like, fuck. or a feeling of like, this book isn't doing anything new, these characters are not revolutionary, they are reacting so normally, and they are doing everything so normally. The first 100 pages of this book were so fucking boring that I dipped for a week and came back. I like at the end of those first 100 pages how that Donna Keel guy gets murdered, and it's just kind of like the bookend to that section. That was good, but the rest of it was just like, Leela's doing better than me in class, oh my god, but she's so cool and I really like hanging out with her. The book did get better to me after a while and there was more meaning in the framing of it, but the book didn't really earn back my love after I snoozed through the first bit. I also didn't like the framing of this person looking back on themselves as a child. The author put so much complex, well-defined emotion onto herself as a child, which she clearly wasn't feeling at the time, and I don't see the appeal or interest in doing that. We hear exactly how this narrator felt in this adult, complicated way, and it gets really tedious. If it's a book about kids, I want to read them as kids, because I want to be able to take away the meaning from the book from the author's way of describing the kids, not just the author going, as a child I felt this way, and now I realize that was actually really meaningful. I want to be shown that it was meaningful to me, not been told that it was meaningful for her. Occasionally there are gaps and the unreliability of the narrator is like occasionally interesting, and I felt like that probably gets amped up as the books go on. Someone can correct me on that, but that was just kind of what I thought might be going on. But as it stands, I don't know why Leela being the top of her class was something I had to read about for 100 pages. The ending of the book wrapped up some of the, I guess, the key themes of the book, or some of the, like, plot threads, I suppose. But it didn't resolve the purpose of the book itself. The whole thing felt purposeless and like the ground floor for a later book series, which it was. I'm not reading the whole book series, and as it is, I don't feel like this book stands by itself by the ending. I will not give up on this author. I will read maybe The Lost Daughter because I liked the movie, and maybe I'll read some standalone stuff from her so I don't get that kind of purposeless feeling. But as it was, this felt like a lot of waffling to me. It's definitely because I'm a man. Oh, I just can't get Elena Ferrante because I'm a man. Oh my god, oh, comment that so you feel smart! The next book I read was Bunny, this being the inspiration behind the famous Jack Edwards image. This book is much too self-serious at points. There are way too many scenes of the main character sitting in a room talking to themselves, and taking 100 pages to get to the funny stuff is way too long for a book like this. I also thought the ending was really obvious. At this point, it's more shocking to not do the twist than to do the twist. If you haven't read the book, you'll get what I mean when you read it. However, there's a middle section of this book where I didn't necessarily expect what the gimmick would be, and I thought it was really trashy and fun in a self-aware way that I find in a lot of sort of B-movies. One quote that I took from this book that I've been saying is, "Fuck hands, we want the cock." I do not resent this book becoming a book talk thing. It doesn't have this Colleen Hoover blindness to what it's doing, and the premise is wonderfully stupid. And I read a couple of other smaller things as well. I read a lot of Claire Keegan's stories. She should win the Nobel if Alice Munro can, because Claire Keegan is better. Particularly that story So Late in the Day made me tear up. It was so mean-spirited and sad. It was excellent. I read Foster again as well. Perfect. Her career is not super long, but it's one of the most consistent of any author ever. I didn't give up on making a vlog for the Brothers Karamazov. I'm about halfway through it. I put it on hold so I could do the book along list, which I kind of regret, but I will come back and do the Brothers Karamazov vlog. I am enjoying the book. I'm also just figuring out how a vlog works and what I should put in it, so it will be a while. But yeah, no, that's what I read in the last 2 months. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!